champion for the truth about stories is Melanie Bubble, the college head at Guzowski College. Please welcome her.
Trent is a circus, so maybe... no, never mind. Thomas King is alive and lives in Guelph, so he would come, I bet. That's my first pitch. Why should you read this book? What makes it great? This book explains why all other books, all stories are important. It explains why and how any story was ever told. Thomas King tells us that the truth about stories is that that's all we are. And he makes sure we know that the original stories were the oral histories of the original people, the First Nations of North America. The other books up for debate tonight, none would matter, none would exist without the first stories of the first peoples. It's important to also know why we need stories, why they are important and why they matter. We all need to know that first before we pick up any other book or any story. Thomas King is telling stories here. Some are about him, some are creation stories and First Nations oral histories. In between his stories, which are funny and tragic and adventurous and interesting all on their own, King tricks us a little bit too by managing to work in the complicated nature of the history of Indigenous peoples and how they have been treated. He tries to do this without hitting us over the head, and he tries to do it in a funny way, telling metaphorical tales, for example, about Coyote and the ducks and how Coyote steals the duck's feathers, for instance. But these points of humor mask his other points. As King slyly says to us at one point, "Don't worry, this is not the prelude to a flock of generalizations and caustic complaints. I'm not going to carry on about genocide, or residential schools, or blankets infected with smallpox. No one has been able to prove that one anyway. And I'm not going to mention Big Bear, or Louis Riel, or the Lubicon Lake Cree, or the Dene at Davis Inlet, or Dudley George at Ipperwash. I'm not going to talk about the forced removal of Indians from their homes or the reserve system, or the paternalistic manner in which governments manage the affairs of Native people." But of course he has, hasn't he? And he's a clever fellow, and we can forgive him for these moments of serious stuff because he's a damn fine storyteller. King makes a very strong case for the value of stories. And if stories are all we have, then surely we should know these stories. And they are especially important, I think, to Canadians. They're important stories as well for Trent to read. Why? Trent's Indigenous and Canadian Studies programs were the first of their kind in the country, and we of all people should be aware of the value of these particular stories. King tells us that stories can be medicine. They can cure or they can injure. Somehow he gets us to swallow our medicine, but he makes it taste a little bit better. We hear some of the hard truths about Indian and white encounters in Canada, but in this short book you get it all. You get funny, self-deprecating tales of King's short-lived basketball career, for example, his travels to Australia, his failed attempts to work as a culler of deer herds in New Zealand, and slipped into all of this are his musings on the images and constructs of Indianness in North America. We should all read this book for a whole bunch of worthy, very weighty academic reasons. But I think we like to be entertained as well as we take our medicine. And maybe, as King muses, entertainment is part of what it all means. Maybe, as he says at some points in the book, entertainment is the story of survival. Now here's how King ends every chapter, and I'm going to finish with this point as well. Take this story. It's yours. Do with it what you will. But don't say in the years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you heard this story. You've heard it now. Thank you.
And our last book for the evening is The Englishman's Boy by Guy van der Haag. And our celebrity reader for that is Jared Nechtel, the president of the Autonomy College Captain. Please welcome.
Now, do I speak loudly enough that I don't need to use the mic? I don't even want to put it down. Nope. Gonna use it anyway. Oh, turn it off. That's a good idea too. There we go. All right. So, as a prelude, the Englishman's Boy has joined a group of wolfers just south of the Montana border in 1873. In this scene, he watches as Tom Hardwick, the wolfers' leader, torments a wounded bull buffalo. Scotty is one of the wolfers who has befriended the Englishman's boy. As the Englishman's boy closes, he can hear shouting, wild cries, sees rifles bristling, horses stamping and wheeling. He reins his lathered horse in beside Scotty, stands in his stirrups to view the charivari. 30 yards off, Hardwick is on his horse, head to head with a big bull buffalo. Vogel was scouting for Indian trace when he spots this lone bull, a man called George Bell tells him excitedly. Hardwick bets Vogel he can't take him down from back yonder, one shot with his Sharps buffalo gun. Vogel lets fly and misses clean. The buffalo breaks and Hardwick snaps off a chance shot. Lucky son of a bitch hits one of his legs and cripples it. He points to the buffalo sidling and backing, shaggy head swinging slowly from side to side like a church bell tolling as Hardwick edges a nervous pony towards him. Bell grins, playing some kind of bean-eater Mexican bullfighter, I reckon. The bull struggles up, smeared with ashy dust, panting, maddened, drool hanging like tinsel from his beard. Hardwick slaps his horse forward with a rifle barrel along the flank, and the bull bawls, hooks his horns into the earth, gores and rips the prairie, showering dust and dirt over his back, his blunt head. And Hardwick, heeling his horse on, a cold, arrogant look on his face, rifle stock planted on his hip. The bull dashes for the horse. The smashed leg crumples again, and the buffalo capsizes, a blur of flailing legs. The wolfers guffaw, trumpet and bellow. Hardwick steps his horse daintily around the buffalo while the bull strains to rise, great hump and shoulders pitching, wrenching himself to totter on 3 legs, fractured foreleg flapping like a broken branch only held together by a shred of bark. Hardwick presses the jibbing horse to where the bull waits with black, distended tongue and blood-red eyes, shaking his huge head, flinging threads of slobber into his dirty, matted wool, massive shoulders bridling, the curved, polished horns hooking the air. Hardwick, erect in the saddle, eyes on the bull, rowels the horse on. The musk of the bull flaring the mare's nostrils, lifting her head higher and higher on a twisted neck, turning her eyes crazed and white, firing her hind legs into an executioner's drumroll. The heavy head rises, the red eyes stare. The Englishman's boy ducks at the sudden explosion behind his ear. Hardwick's horse is rearing and Hardwick clinging to her back. An acrid whiff of gunpowder sweeps like smelling salts through the head of the Englishman's boy. The bull is slowly dropping to the earth, a mass of meat and bone sinking slowly under its weight, hindquarters slumping, head lolling. He subsides into the bunch grass with a groan. A whoosh of dust squirts out from under the collapsing body. The Englishman's boy speaks to Scotty, cannot hear his own voice. Scotty does not hear it either. His rifle is still tucked in his shoulder, and he is looking down the steel blue barrel at the dying buffalo. A whiff of blue smoke unravels when he slowly lowers the carbine. Now the Englishman's boy can hear Hardwick shouting angrily, wanting to know who the fuck has meddled in his frolic.